It's fun to eat. People can't be beat. When Elena cooks, it's sure sweet. When Elena...
Hi, I'm Colleen DeBase.
And I'm food historian Victoria Flexner.
And welcome back to Seasoned from the Story Exchange,
A series where we're looking at the women who helped define American food.
The audio you just heard is from the 1950s television show hosted by
Elena Zelayeta, the focus of our episode today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to my kitchen.
She was a Mexican-American chef working in California starting in the 1930s.
She had a popular restaurant called Elena's Mexican Kitchen that served dishes like enchiladas, chili rellenos, and fajitas.
Dishes which today, I think it's fair to say, many Americans are familiar with.
Yeah, whether you're eating birria from a food truck, tucking into a Tex-Mex burrito, savoring a complex mole, or even getting some Taco Bell from the drive-thru, Mexican or Mexican-inspired food is a staple of American food culture.
But in the 1930s, when Elena opened her restaurant, Mexican cuisine was just not as common in the U.S. as it is today.
No, it wasn't. And Elena was really at the forefront of exposing Americans to Mexican flavors, not just through her restaurant, but also her cookbooks, frozen food line, and her TV show.
In the meantime, I'll start telling our viewers about the tuna fish.
An incredible legacy made even more remarkable by the fact that at the age of 36, when she was at the height of her career as a chef, she went blind.
And had to relearn how to cook without sight, using her other senses, touch, sound, and smell, to figure out how to operate in the kitchen.
But you really don't have to worry. Now look at me. I can't see, and yet it's easy.
And yet, like a number of women we've looked at so far in this series, she somehow slipped through the cracks, despite being, by many accounts, a firecracker of a personality.
Yeah, legend has it that when she ran her restaurant, she would dance for the crowd as they shouted, "Olé."
And if you don't think that you are going to enjoy this, just you remember, you will. I know it.
It's such an amazing story.
I called up a columnist from the LA Times.
My name's Gustavo Arellano. I'm also the author of the book Taco USA, How Mexican Food Conquered America.
He loves talking about the history of Mexican food.
And especially people who deserve more attention like Elena. Sadly, not surprisingly, her name basically got erased from these stories, from the bigger narrative of Mexican food in the United States. And this is something that sadly has happened a lot just with Latino history in the United States. And the people who are writing the greater narrative of the American story just completely ignore them.
Which is particularly ironic considering the simple fact that almost any restaurant you walk into in this country, that kitchen is run by Mexican chefs, no matter the cuisine.
Yeah, I know the late TV food star Anthony Bourdain opened up a lot of people's eyes to this a while back. Here's a short clip from his show, No Reservations.
Let's be honest, really honest. Who's the backbone of the American restaurant business? Whose sudden departure could shut down almost every good restaurant in every major city? What's your name? What's your job? And what part of France are you from?
Noé, trabajo en Saladero. Soy mexicano.
And of course, that's every chef responding in Spanish about what part of Mexico they're from.
To this, we're going to add the half an onion, chili to pins, or you can use chili powder.
Over the course of her career, Elena would introduce Americans to Mexican recipes. And by 1967, when she published her last cookbook, Elena's Favorite Foods California Style, she expands to recipes for croissants, beef stroganoff, and coquilles Saint-Jacques.
Right. She becomes not just a chef of one cuisine, she's really just a master chef.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean it was an easy journey. Elena came to prominence at a time when there was fierce anti-Mexican sentiment.
And also, she was a restaurant owner and chef at a time when few women held those roles.
If women were in the food industry, they generally worked as waitstaff or ran female-friendly establishments like tea rooms. Although women, of course, were still expected to do the cooking at home.
There's no better way of looking at the lives of women in the past than by looking at the foods that they overwhelmingly prepared.
That's Jeffrey Pilcher.
I'm a professor of history and food studies at the University of Toronto.
He's been writing about Mexican food history for over 30 years. I asked him about Elena's life and legacy.
She was a pioneer in many ways. She had the ability, the knowledge, and the charisma to push Mexican food on the path towards becoming part of that American national cuisine.
Elena was born in Mexico City in 1898.
She was born of Spanish parents, I should say. And her parents ran a restaurant in a sort of a tourist location outside of Mexico City.
Elena grew up in a comfortable middle-class life. She helped her mother in the kitchen. Eventually, she went to boarding school in Mexico City, where she learned English.
They settled in the United States after the Revolution of 1910.
The Mexican Revolution was a nearly decade-long battle that started in 1910 with the overthrow of the dictator Porfirio Diaz and ultimately led to the establishment of a constitutional republic.
This was a time when a lot of people who were, sort of driven out of Mexico, upper-class people who felt endangered by the revolutionaries, the fighting, and they had every reason to fear that.
Elena's family settled in San Francisco.
To make a living in the United States, they continued to do the food work that they had done before.
Elena's story is starting to remind me of Cecilia Chang, who we dedicated another episode to.
Yeah, it's another story of an immigrant leaving their country behind during a time of revolution and bringing some of their culture here through their cuisine.
And also San Francisco, too. Okay, so what happens next?
In 1925, Elena married Lorenzo Zelayeta, who was also from Mexico. Apparently, Elena's father was furious she'd married a man from Mexico, as he had raised his children to, quote, be American. But their marriage was not a particularly happy one. Lorenzo, by some accounts, began having affairs. Elena found herself home alone most of the time. But she also began to form her own identity and decided that she was going to open a restaurant in her apartment. Elena's Mexican Village, what can you tell us about her first restaurant that started in her living room?
Yeah, so this was the restaurant that she opened up during the Depression and becomes very successful and, sort of established what we'd call today a buzz. She was a very good cook. And there was a lot of interest during this time for Mexican food on the part of elites in California.
But the Great Depression also triggered some wider behaviors within American society that feel all too familiar.
As jobs evaporated, white Americans began accusing Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans of taking away their jobs.
There were raids and deportations. Between 1929 and 1939, over 1 million people of Mexican origin were forcefully repatriated to Mexico by the American government. Nearly 60% were born in America.
It's racism. It's historical racism.
That's Gustavo Arellano again. We talked a bit about anti-immigrant backlash, unfortunately just as relevant today as it was then, and how food can sometimes cut through.
I would hope that every time a hater eats a scoopful of tamal or pozole or whatever, that maybe, just maybe one day, they might think, well, if the food's so great, maybe the people might be great as well.
How would you define Elena's cuisine?
Elena's cuisine is Mexican food in the United States in that era. So the taco still had not taken the prominence that it has today, ubiquity really. You're not going to have burritos because burritos don't really become a thing until the 1970s.
The dishes served at Elena's restaurant were homey, traditional classics, almost comfort food. Enchiladas, chili rellenos.
It is a time capsule of what it is.
Obviously, Mexican food is not a monolith. It's an incredibly diverse cuisine. Every state, every region has a different cuisine.
When it comes to food, there's always going to be regional varieties, both in the homeland cuisine and also the diaspora cuisine, because you have to adapt to where you live. I really do subscribe to the philosophy of the great Chicano scholar, Americo Paredes from Texas, where he believes in the idea of greater Mexico. You know, like Mexican food is wherever there's someone eating something that they think is Mexican food.
That's a good line. So it sounds like Elena's dishes introduced many people to Mexican flavors, and then around that same time, different variations of Mexican food began popping up all over the U.S.
Despite government policies, as Mexican Americans became ever more entwined in local communities, we see cuisines like Tex-Mex emerge, which is, of course, from the state of Texas.
So this is a cuisine very much based on its history of being a borderland. So big beef country, flour tortilla country, cheese, the chile con carne, and the margaritas, the combo plate, the fajitas, of course.
Then there is Cal-Mex,
which is a term that I invented. Not that I'm trying to brag, but it's like, okay, what is distinctive about a Mexican food of California? It starts with the burrito, mission-style burrito. What I, for lack of a better term, call the Chicano burrito of Los Angeles. So powdery, huge flour tortillas, meat and beans and rice, but stuffed French fries inside of them. So you have Sonoran-style cuisine, exclusively really to Arizona. You have variations in Wichita, Kansas, in Utah Mexican food. Again, wherever there's Mexicans, there's going to be a new style of Mexican food. It's absolutely an amazing panoply.
Okay, so back to the 1930s. Elena's restaurant is doing really well. In fact, she's moved it out of her living room and into the King George Hotel near Union Square.
Yeah, she's becoming a known name in the Bay Area. Then two things happen. She becomes pregnant with her second child, and her eyesight begins to deteriorate rapidly. She goes to see a doctor who tells her that a childhood bout of scarlet fever has now, decades later, caused retinal detachment. At that time, there was no treatment, and the doctor gave her a devastating diagnosis. He told her she was going to eventually lose her eyesight completely. And she does. She goes blind. Her son Billy is born. She couldn't work, and without her at the helm, her restaurant closed under a mountain of debt.
Elena slipped out of the public eye for almost a decade. She battled severe depression, even contemplated suicide.
But somehow, over time, she found a strength, a resilience. She slowly taught herself how to cook again. There's a really lovely passage that we'll read here from a book about Elena's story.
When she cracked eggs, she cradled her hands to catch the whites before they ran through her fingers. She smelled deep fat heating on the stove and determined its temperature.
This is from the book Taste Makers by Mayuk Sen.
She let 15-minute radio programs serve as her timers for baking. Soon she taught herself to deep-fry chile rellenos without scalding herself. She caramelized sugar without burning the bottom of the pan. She scrambled eggs until they were light as fleece.
In 1944, Elena began to teach cooking lessons at San Francisco's Center for the Blind.
It is really striking the way that she is kind of a pioneer of that accessibility movement and the idea that people who would have been dismissed in the past as it's useless and tragic, perhaps, but, simply unable to contribute, and finding ways to ensure that they can make the most of their lives and adjusting the kitchen.
Keep in mind, this was decades before the Americans with Disability Act.
I think that is another part of her legacy that absolutely deserves recognition. In that way, she was also very much at the cutting edge of something that was emerging and important.
Coming up after the break,
I head to the Huntington Library in California to see Elena's cookbooks in person.
And we speak to Zarela Martinez and her son Aaron Sanchez about Elena's lasting impact.
We'll be right back.
The Story Exchange is an award-winning nonprofit media platform that elevates women's voices and achievements. If you like what you're listening to in our special food series, check out our episode on Southern legend Edna Lewis.
She didn't look like anyone else. She seemed to be 10 feet tall. It was just a majestic and also quiet presence.
And stay tuned for more, including an upcoming episode on Indigenous cuisine featuring experts like Lois Ellen Frank and Jill Falcon Raymaker.
Welcome back. Today, we're taking a look at the life of Chef Elena Zelayeta.
A culinary pioneer who taught Americans about Mexican cuisine.
And Vic, I know you had a hard time tracking down her books, right?
Yeah, she wrote 4 cookbooks, but unfortunately, they are all out of print. But near Los Angeles, the Huntington Library has a few copies in its rare books division. So on a recent trip to the West Coast, I decided to stop by. Hi, my name is Victoria Flexner, here to see some books.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's get you checked in.
Okay, cool. After I went through security and a 15-minute orientation, I finally sat down in a quiet reading room with Elena's very first self-published cookbook, which came out in 1944. Elena's famous Mexican and Spanish recipes. It's spiral-bound, the pages are slightly browned at the edges from age. Each chapter has little illustrations and sayings like, "It is better to have bread left over than to run short of wine," or "Our teeth are closer to us than our relatives."
And what kind of recipes are in her first cookbook?
The book contains recipes for tortilla soup, tamales, chicken and green mole sauce, guacamole, stuffed peppers. These are super accessible recipes, and what I think is interesting is she provides workarounds for people, or rather Americans, who maybe didn't want a dish to be too spicy or can't find certain ingredients.
What kind of workarounds?
Well, she suggests if a home cook can't find chorizo, a good old American hot dog will do. And if you can't find Mexican chocolate, you can use Hershey's and add some cinnamon to it.
Do you think she's kind of watering down the recipes?
I mean, in a sense, maybe, but I think what she's really doing is normalizing this cuisine that was relatively foreign to Americans in the 1940s, making sure it doesn't feel intimidating or like something they can't do themselves at home.
Hello, everybody. I am Elena. I have many wonderful recipes of my own that I would like to share with you.
And this, of course, is her cooking show, which began airing locally in black and white in San Francisco in the 1950s.
She did much the same thing here, making recipes look easy. But what is truly remarkable is that she was blind at this point.
Because I cannot see, I have had to learn the very unusual way of doing things.
Her young son, Billy, was her assistant on set.
Now, pour the whole thing into the bowl, Billy.
Say, Mother, when are we going to start with the salad? I'm hungry.
I felt...
Apparently, the cameramen also attached strings to her feet, which they would tug to tell her which direction to look. If her left foot felt a tug, she knew she needed to look towards the camera to her left.
It's really incredible to watch because you wouldn't necessarily know she's blind. She's definitely feeling around, but she's cutting sausage, grinding pepper, and using a lot of humor.
Will you get on this side, Bill, so that you can toss the salad for me? I could do it, but I really want to put you to work. You haven't worked enough.
She's also credited with being the first Latina to have her own cooking show, which was called It's Fun to Eat.
And it really does show off her personality, which seems warm, charming, joyful, remarkable considering what she went through.
When Elena's cooked, it's fun to eat. Yum, yummy.
She made it fun.
I reached out to a longtime legend in the New York City restaurant world.
I am Zarela Martinez.
To talk about how Elena served as a role model for generations of Mexican-American and Latina chefs.
I'm very happy to be here with you and talking about all this sensational people.
For listeners who don't know, Zarella was pivotal in helping bring respected Mexican cuisine to New York starting in the 1980s. And I personally have very fond memories of her restaurant Zarella's at 50th and 2nd, which was open for 23 years. That was the first place I ever had chili relleno, and the margaritas were also to die for. You famously didn't know how many you had until you stood up. It was a really festive place, decorated with all these colorful Mexican paper banners.
Zarella actually told me some people used to compare her to Elena.
She had the reputation of being very entertaining, and she would sing and do all this kind of stuff at the restaurants. So it really related to her customers, and that's what they used to say, that I was similar to her.
Zarella also told me about her own childhood.
I always grew up with northern Mexican food, particularly Sonora Mexican food, because my mother was from Sonora.
How she got her start with the Creole chef.
Paul Prudhomme's in Louisiana, and he really connected, and I ended up cooking for him for 1 week and teaching him Mexican food.
And how she wound up in New York City.
I decided to move to New York. I moved here with $10,000 and my little kids. I said, I'm going to make it here.
And then part of the way into our chat.
Wow. Zarella, it looks like Aaron's iPhone is waiting to join. Is this your son?
Yeah.
Should I let him into the chat?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, what a fun surprise.
Aaron Sanchez, Zarella's son, is a pretty famous chef. He's got a bunch of restaurants, he's written a number of cookbooks, and if you watch the Food Network, you've probably seen him on Chopped.
Chef Aaron Sanchez, everybody. How you guys doing?
So I was thrilled when he spontaneously joined our call.
Hello, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm sorry I didn't get dressed up. It's just 7:30 over here in California, so it's a little early.
Don't worry. This is a relaxed environment. Yeah. Well, Zarella, how do you think that the work that Elena did, how did her work sort of pave the way?
She was everywhere. You know, she had her own television show. She was really good at promoting herself. And she became really absorbed in the culture, so she was multicultural and could communicate with people, her enthusiasm. That was very contagious.
And she was truly a pioneer.
Yeah.
Like, you have to mind, she was before people like Patricia Quintana.
Oh, no, this is ages ago.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, Mom. But she preceded Patricia and those kind of chefs and these iconic figures, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
These Mexican women chefs, you know, and that were kicking butt.
As the mother and son point out, Elena came well before prominent Mexican chefs of more recent memory, including Patricia Quintana, Patty Hinich, and Marcela Valladolid. But she clearly laid the foundation for them.
Yeah, and you think about that time where Julia Child's doing her thing, and it's kind of like they're in that same era, you know? That's very impressive. And people like Cecilia Chang and all of these iconic women that are just representing their food and their cultures with such grace.
We talked about how Elena, like so many of the women we've profiled for this series, including Lena Richard of New Orleans, didn't just cook. They taught classes, they had TV shows, they started frozen food lines.
Why you think it is that chef personalities have to have so many different kind of avenues in which they're doing their work?
Well, there's so many restaurants that you need to promote your restaurant. And merchandise is like the absolutely best way to promote. Because you're always trying to get in the press. You know, it's really hard to keep a restaurant busy for 25 years or 22 years like I did. And also the challenge of being in different markets is really interesting.
The thing is that chefs inherently are really busybodies. And I'm speaking for myself. I need to be busy because if a chef doesn't have a mission, sometimes they can do bad things to themselves. You know what I mean? And just so I like to always be, busy. But the idea too is that there's so many different outlets that you can promote yourself.
As a celebrity chef, Aaron understands how powerful the medium of TV can be. It doubtlessly propelled Elena to a certain level of public recognition, at least in California where it aired.
I just think, what the brilliance is of the television medium is that somebody that lives in Wichita, Kansas, that might not have access to Mexican ingredients could be inspired by me preparing a recipe. So now the message gets transmitted to a larger scope. And I just think that's when television's powerful, you know?
All right, as we get to the end of this episode, I have a question that we've asked a few times during this series, and it's this. Why isn't Elena more famous?
Yeah, we keep circling back to this. We talked a lot about it in our episode on Lena Richard, the Creole chef in New Orleans who has similarly slipped through the cracks of history. She died young, though, whereas Elena lived until the relatively old age of 75. She died in 1974.
Is it because they're women and women of color, or is there something more?
Probably all of the above. Mayuk Sen, the author of Tastemakers, who we quoted earlier, offers one reason why Elena gets little credit or recognition, suggesting that Diana Kennedy, the British-born non-Latina writer who dedicated her life to documenting Mexican cuisine, came after Elena and basically usurped her position. Here's Mayuk Sen speaking about it on C-SPAN.
When we look at Elena Zelayeta's story, I think we can see quite clearly how American memory functions, in the sense that there's usually only room for one figure when it comes to a certain cuisine, especially if that cuisine is not a part of continental Europe, let's say.
We spoke earlier about whether or not Elena had watered down her recipes or not, and it seems her TV show tended to gear some episodes toward a white audience. In fact, she's actually making spaghetti, and one of the few recordings we have, which are from the archives at San Francisco State University.
Exactly. And we noticed, too, that the show's jingle basically mispronounces her name, using the more Americanized version of Elena.
When Elena cooks, it's sure sweet. When Elena cooks, it's fun.
I don't think it's a secret that it's been far easier for white chefs to get TV shows and book deals and achieve stardom. Actually, Aaron and his mom had an interesting take on this.
I actually, when somebody's not from Mexico and cooks Mexican food, I feel like there's a purist approach to it.
You're right.
They want to pay homage to it. We have a different connection with it because we're from there, you know?
Yeah.
Somebody that dedicates themselves to Mexican food, a la Susanna Trilling, Diana Kennedy, Rick Bayless, will they ever really get it if they don't have the culture in their blood? You know what I'm saying? So unless you're brought up that way, I don't know. It's up for debate.
What is clear, though, is that Elena's story, far more than most chefs, is truly an incredible one, punctuated with loss, tragedy, and, of course, impressive achievements.
Right. In addition to the loss of her vision, her husband later died in a horrible car crash. And yet she persevered, even launching a frozen food business with her sons that helped nationalize Mexican food.
There's so many aspects to her story that strike me as really pioneering, which is why I'm flummoxed as to why America does not remember her quite in the way that it should.
The good news is that more people like Mayuk are remembering Elena.
The New York Times ran her obituary in 2023 as part of its Overlooked No More series, and the actress Eva Longoria featured Elena on her Hungry for History podcast.
She was a celebrity chef before celebrity chefs existed.
It's made me happy to be able to see Elena's story getting a new life, not just yourself, Mayuk Sen, my own book, and other people. And it's been great.
That's Gustavo Arellano again. We talked about how much work went into just being able to see her cookbooks firsthand.
I hope her cookbooks do get reissued, or at least she gets more attention by people who want to look that stuff up. She was a Mexican immigrant in a world that until very recently was dominated by white people, namely people who taught Americans how to cook Mexican food. Elena hasn't had that advocate the way she deserved.
We thank all of our guests for making sure that Elena Zelayeta is remembered.
And we thank you for listening.
This has been Seasoned from the Story Exchange. Join us next time to hear more stories about innovative and inspirational women doing the things you'd never dream of. or maybe you would. If you like this podcast, please share on social media or post a review wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show. And visit our website at thestoryexchange.org, where you'll find news, videos, and tips for entrepreneurial women. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at info@thestoryexchange.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky.
I'm Colleen DeBase, reporting by Victoria Flexner. Sound editing provided by Nusha Balyan. Production coordinator is Noelle Flago. Executive producers are Sue Williams and Victoria Wong. Our mixer is Pat Donahue. Recorded at Cutting Room Studios in New York City.